Hi, everybody. Andrea Fair here with Flying Free Ministries, and I'm so excited to introduce you to author and wonderful mom, Christie Thomas. Thanks so much for joining us, Christie.
Well, thanks for having me.
Bet. Can you just tell us a little bit about your life and where you live and what you're currently working on?
Sure. I live in central Alberta and I am currently homeschooling my boys. I started last year before it was mandatory. So, but homeschooling by choice. It wasn't something that I'd planned to do with my life, but it sort of came about and I am really enjoying it. I think we're all really enjoying it. So I have those three boys that I'm homeschooling. They're 6, 9, and 11. Had to double check that. And my husband works for the school board, so that's been interesting. I don't know how many people at the school board, the public school board, know that his family homeschools. Yeah, so that's our family. I used to be a children's pastor for most of 2006 through 2018. So for them, I had took some time off in between to have babies, but for the rest of the time, I was working at the same church. And now I write books and raise my kids and garden.
Yay, variety, hey?
Yeah.
So right now you're working on a devotional for young kiddos. Is it for boys and moms, or tell us about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a prayer journal slash devotional for moms and boys about elementary age boys. So I did it with each of my three boys, and it was super interesting as I was writing it and then testing it out with each of them, how the different ages reacted differently to different devotionals. So it goes through the life of David, through the life and writings of David. So starting from his anointing, and then we go through some of his psalms, learn how to pray, go through his whole life, including the Bathsheba Uriah incident,
Yeah.
and all the way to when he's running away from Absalom. So lots of interesting things that are stories that you might not normally hear in Sunday school. We go through those as well and see what we can learn about following God, because David is the man who was after God's own heart. So what does that look like? So that's what that one is for. So there is a devotion, a question to talk about, just like a really almost like a silly question just to kind of get you into it.
Yeah.
And then you read the devotion, and then there's a little prayer section for the kids or for the boys to write something down or to draw a picture or draw a comic or some sort of response to the devotional. And then the mom has a whole page to write her prayers for her kids, for her son, based on what they just read.
Oh, neat. Oh, that sounds awesome. I have three boys, so there you go. I will be buying your journal because that's awesome. Um, okay, I have so many questions. They're all rolling around my brain here. But first of all, could you tell us, like, okay, so if you've written two Quinn books, I see them behind you. Can you tell
Yeah.
us about them also?
Yes, So these are, yeah, my Quinn books. So they are picture books. I did not draw the pictures. I just wrote the words. Here, I can grab one for you. This one, this one's even in German now.
Oh, cool.
Shocking. I just showed up at my door one day and I was like, what? I wrote
What is
that?
happening?
Has my name on it, but I can't read it. Anyway, so Quinns Promise Rock is about a little owl named Quinn who is scared and asking her dad all the what if questions. What if you fly away? What if I can't find you? All those questions that kids ask when they're nervous or afraid. And her dad flies her to the top of a mountain and he says, well, first he shows her, you can see our tree from here, but also God is like this mountain. He is strong and sturdy and he never leaves and he never moves. He will always show you where to go. And then it starts to rain on them and they fly into a cave. And he tells his daughter, God is also like this cave. He's a shelter, like it says in the Bible, that God is our refuge. And so then it stops raining and they go to the ground and her dad picks up a little rock in his talon. Whoop, this way. And he says, God is also like this rock. He is portable, basically. He's always with you, right? Like he's not this far away God. He's not immovable. I mean, he's immovable. He's just always with you, right? Like, so
Yeah.
just like you can feel if you put this rock in your pocket and you can feel that that rock is there, God is with you, just like that rock. Now, God isn't the rock. Let's not slip into idolatry, but he is with us just like that rock is with us. So when I go to preschools or elementary schools and I read this book, I leave them a rock and I say, you put this rock in your pocket and you can let it remind you that just like you can feel this rock, God is also with you. You can't see God or touch God, but you can touch this rock and it can remind you that God is there.
That's awesome.
And then the other one is about, I can't reach that one, but the other one, Quinn adopts a little firefly that's injured and she nurses it back to health and they become friends. And then one day the firefly is gone and her parents say, well, like he had to go home one day, right? He's better now. And Quinn is very upset and wondering why God would let, like, God, why God would take her friend away.
Right.
And so then she flies off into the forest and she's crying, and her mom flutters down and puts her wing around her and is like, you know what, sometimes hard things happen. And God doesn't always stop those bad things from happening, but he does promise to be with you all the time. So, and then it ends on a nice happy note where they fly into a field where there's all these fireflies, and Quinn's like, oh, it's all the blinks. Oh, my friends.
Wow, I love that you're willing to talk about the what if questions and even
Mm.
the about loss, right? Because it's so those are the topics that you always run into as a parent, but
Mhm.
we either creatively avoid or are like, what do I do? What do I do? And so I love that there are just books that you can have at on hand, and they're really great gifts,
Yeah.
like to be able to. I was like searching my house. I'm like, I have her book. Where is it? And then I'm like, my brain's like, you gave it away. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So I'm pretty sure I gave it away to my little guy who lost his grandpa, and I was
Aw.
like, he needed, just to have a story that could help him make sense of the crazy of life that is down here. So thank you
Mhm.
for your service to our little monkeys and to us as moms. It's huge and really important. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, were you always passionate about kids and their faith journey, or has that something that's grown in you over your lifetime? Or let us know about
I always really felt the most comfortable with kids. Like if we're going to be talking about relational, relating with other people, kids are my jam. I have no problem talking to kids, and I've always been that way. Even through awkward junior high and high school, I always helped in Sunday school, and I loved the little kids. That was always my thing. And so my plan was to try and become a pediatrician, and then I, found my husband and was like, do I really want to work that hard? Or do I want to have my own kids? For the first time, it felt like maybe that was a possibility. So then I just finished up my science degree, and then didn't try to go into medicine. And instead, I started working at a church and really fell in love with that, the kind of the melding of my love for kids and also my passion for faith
that.
and God. So then it kind of came out of that. I always did like writing too. I mostly just wrote random things here and there for children's ministry. I worked on the newsletter. I wrote little scripts and puppet shows and stuff, but never anything like a book
And
until just a few years.
hello. And 3 years ago?
4 years ago, I
Four
think.
years ago? Yeah.
It's probably almost 5 years ago already, actually, that I wrote the story for Quinns Promise Rock. It just kind of blurped out of me.
It
When I
did.
talk to kids about it, I say, you know how sometimes there's water fountains that just kind of trickle out and you have to wait? And that's how most writing is. But every once in a while, you turn on a water fountain and it shoots in your face, and you're like, whoa! That's what Quinns Promise Rock was like. It just kind of
I love it.
exploded in my face, and I'm like, I have to write this down. And
This-
then everything else has been like
All right.
slow waiting for it. Yeah.
I get that. I totally get that. That's a writer. Yep. Oh, wow. So I'm curious, as we talk about people relating with others, freedom and relating to others, for those who are kind of scared of kids or are just kind of like, okay, so I like kids, but I don't need to hang out with them all the time, but I'm an aunt or a grandparent or whatever. Do you have any tips for how do we engage with little people without being creepy? Because I really like kids, and then my daughter she's 16. She's like, Mom, you can't just like smile and stare at kids. I'm like, okay,
Oh,
what's appropriate? So there's that reality too of like, okay.
that's right. I was watching an episode of This Is Us recently, and one of the characters is talking to a kid, and the mom is like, "Why is this like your new friend? Like he's a 40-year-old man. That's really creepy."
I bet,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I think it probably depends on your personality, right? For the longest time, I was the one that just played with the kids. I didn't sit down and have really deep conversations with them until I knew them. I was always just the one that would play with them, start games, or like, hey, let's go play hide and seek in the woods, or I would make faces at them. I remember sitting in a restaurant with my parents, and there was a little kid who just kept looking at me. So I was like I would just make faces at her, and finally her parents turned around and were like, "Do you babysit? She really likes you." I
Nice.
think it's just they sense the child heart in me. I think I still have that a little less now that I have my own kids. Now I'm like, okay, I can handle your kids a little less now that I have them constantly in my life. But I think it's just that childishness that I have in me. If you are somebody that's not natural with kids, that's okay. Like kids can sense when you're faking it. They're really good at knowing when people are pretending to like them. So it's okay if you don't really like kids, then maybe find one you do like and start there. Or it's okay. Not everybody. I struggle with talking to older people, so
Yeah.
we all learn. We have to start somewhere.
Yeah, and that's I think good, right? To be willing to start somewhere. And obviously, if you
Mhm.
have a little person that's coming to your life, I mean, you don't have to engage with them on major ways, but a smile, a hello, a how's your day, or I
Yeah.
know it's been interesting to see how when your parents become grandparents, how what comes out of them. And so we have and then Calvin's folks and my folks, and they're all great, but they all totally do different. Like there's some of
Mhm.
the grandparents totally are just like, this is what I'm doing. Join in if you want to. If not, I'll see you at supper. And the other grandparents are like, okay, let's set up this elaborate thing and we will like hang out. And it's like, okay. So it's been kind of fun to watch them and be like, I wonder what I'll be like. Because right now, with
Yeah.
my age range of 11 to 16, I'm like, hopefully that's not for a while because I think I need a few more minutes apart from the monkeys. But
Yeah, exactly.
but that's also why it's great to have awesome resources, right? Because I know then you can do that. Hey, let's just sit down and read this book. I know it's great or
Yeah,
whatever, which is
that's great.
important.
And honestly, just showing interest in a child's life. Like, there's some kids that go down the street, and every time I walk past, they want to say hi to me. And because I treat them not like babies, like some people are like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" I just talk to them like I talk to everybody else. Hey, Sienna, how are you doing? How's life? What are you up to these days?
Yep.
Like,
They feel respected, right? And then they all of a
yeah,
sudden open up. It's amazing how kids you could just be hanging out with them and all of a sudden you're like, okay, it's share time. All right. So
yeah,
it's neat
exactly.
to be available for that for sure. So basically it's been in you this whole time. this
Yeah,
this love for kids, and I just love the diversity of what you do. Like you have the you're obviously your own kiddos that you're loving on and the neighbor kiddos, and then beyond how you have been writing books and getting them out there. How can people connect with your work? Like I know you have I feel like we had a puppet once, an owl puppet, a Quinn puppet. Is that still available,
oh,
or do you
that's an
have
IKEA puppet. That yes,
that you
there is
put
an
with
owl. It is not. I don't own the copyright to that. I do sell it
okay,
in a package. If I go to a conference or something, I'll sell it in a package with my Quinn books. But it's just an IKEA owl for
that you
$6.
can get with your books, which is awesome, people.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you can get the books on Amazon or wherever, and then go to IKEA and get an owl. So
See,
yeah, my website is
I love that.
littleshootsdeeproots.com. Yeah, I recently rebranded to that and I love it a lot too. It feels very me.
Yeah, and I was just on there, and you have a guide that you have available for people. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, it's called the Start Little Guide. So it gives some ideas of if you want to talk about faith with your kids, but you really don't know where to start, or maybe you've tried reading big long devotional books before, you've wanted to have regular prayer times with them, but it's just flopped because nobody's liked it, they've been disengaged, or you don't have time. Usually we find we don't have time when nobody likes it, right? If everybody
Right.
liked it, we'd make time. So I have like these really simple ideas for how to get started so that it becomes a habit in your life. Little 30-second things like praying a simple blessing over your child before you tuck them in, or just turning on music in the car, Christian music in the car. Really simple ways to just start bringing God into your family life without it feeling overwhelming.
I love that. Thank you. That's huge, right? Like it's what parents need. Well, any adult, right? It's hard being an adult, but just those little snippets, those little practical, like, okay, how can I get this going? Because I know, yeah, in our household too, it's been like this is what we want to do, and then you have these grand expectations, and it's like, oh, and that did not work, so we will, and
Let's do it
it's
again. Yeah.
yeah, we will try again. We will go onto Christie's website and check it out. Because it's just and like you said, it's the habit part of it, right? That it's as you continue to engage, there gets to be more of those opportunities to reach in and hear more. And I do love, yeah, again, back to your books. I love how they answer those tough questions. So even I have, because of our age range, I have read little kid stuff at breakfast or whatever and been like, yeah, well, we're gonna do this now. And you can see the big kids, not that they would say they're enjoying it, but they so are.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
sometimes you all just need a break and be like, you know what, let's just go back to the owls and the fireflies. So
Exactly.
yeah, wow. So, do you have any advice you'd like to leave maybe parents who are sick of being home with their beautiful children, who are
Oh,
maybe doing homeschooling and going, ah, do you have any like self-care tips or engaging with your kid tips or just anything you want to leave as we wrap up here?
that's a good question. I really found myself in that place a couple of weeks ago. I kept like my temper was like here, like as soon as anything little happened, I was like, "Oh my goodness, really? Do we need to be doing that right now?" Like not necessarily shouting at them, but just always angry. And I thought, "What is wrong with me? This is not me." And so on Friday, we had a friend, my son's friend came over and he plays with all three of them, which is awesome. So I watched TV on my iPad while I cleaned the bathroom and I watched like 3 or 4 episodes. And then the next day, I just read a book all day and I realized, oh, I needed to be doing those things that recharge me. I didn't realize that I was run down until I realized that I was angry all the time. So I think for most of us parents, it's just realizing what's triggering us. And I thought there's no consistency to what's triggering me right now. Normally, if you're getting triggered by something, it's like, I used to always get angry when my kids were making me late. And then I realized it was actually because I was making me late. And then they were just making me later.
Right?
So
Yeah.
then I realized here's what I needed to do. I needed to step back. I needed to make sure that I wasn't making me late. And then I stopped getting angry about that all the time. But I realized there was no real rhyme or reason to my anger over the last few weeks. And so that was a clear sign to me that I needed to just not do anything. I needed to not work on a book or my blog or think about those things for a while. I needed to give myself permission to just be.
Oh,
And I think we often just don't do that or we feel guilty.
mhm.
I saw a post the other day about something called internalized capitalism, which
Whoa.
I'd never heard this phrase before. Internalized capitalism basically is when you tell yourself, I have to be productive in order to be a real person, or like I just have to always be productive. So even when I was watching TV and cleaning the bathroom at the same time, right? I'm
Yeah.
still being productive. But when we have that sense of that in order to be successful, in order to be good human beings, we always have to be producing something, then we burn ourselves out.
Mm.
So we need to just let ourselves sit and stare at the trees.
Yeah.
I mean, not to the point of laziness, but just letting ourselves relax completely. So for some people, that's a soak in the tub. I mean, I guess you're talking about self-care, really. I've never really been a big fan of that phrase because it feels a little selfish to me. But I realize that if I don't take those moments
Yeah.
sometimes, then I am not caring for my family very well either, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think, yeah, totally. We don't necessarily love the phrase self-care, but sometimes that reflects that, oh, maybe I'm not taking care of me. Like maybe the
Mhm.
guilt is too loud. So when I do try to just be, it's a cycle trigger thing. So yeah, that's
Right.
interesting. I totally, the last couple of days I've just been like, okay, wow, this is where we're at. Okay, we're just
Yeah,
gonna chill because
yeah,
and
exactly.
and it's important, I think, that the more moms and people in ministry or leaders are just share that, you know what, this is a real thing we all face and we can normalize it and be like, and we see it in our own kids and we cut them slack, right? And so
Mhm.
that we would be able to be willing to do the same for ourselves and to be instead of do. That's definitely, God brought that up last week. It's like, so the
Mhm.
part where there's guilt and shame when you're not producing, it's like, oh man,
Right.
we have talked about this before. But
And if we think that we have to be producing in order to be, human beings in this world or to be competent human beings, well, then what is a baby doing? Is a baby not valuable human being because they don't produce
right.
anything but poop?
Right?
And
Literally.
or are elderly? Do they have value, or are people with severe disabilities? Do they have value even though they're not producing anything?
Right.
Yes, of
Yep.
course they do. So why do
Exactly.
we put ourselves pressure on ourselves that we don't put on other people?
That's exactly right. Yep. And I think it is vital to model that for our kids too, right? That, oh, okay, mom is sitting down and watching TV. And part of me's like, oh no, they shouldn't see me watching TV. It's like,
I know,
but it's
I was
like,
like closing the bathroom door. Don't watch me.
it's okay. It's like, what are you doing, mom? But then I saw my kiddo pull up his book and read in his spot. And it's like, okay, no, I'm modeling that it's okay to slow down. It's okay to acknowledge that we're human and we're tired and we need to change it up.
Mhm.
So Yeah. One last question for you. In this COVID craze, what have been some, do you have any different, I don't know, insights onto how to help kids with that? Just all the change that they're facing, maybe wearing masks or just the uniqueness of the times. Like we want to have the whole world over, and oh, sorry, we can't have the whole world over to the house, and those kind of, I guess, disappointments and even some grief in there. Any ideas how to just help them navigate it, or things to be watching for to help to acknowledge that, oh, this might be a grief related thing?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that that's a grief related thing, right? Like if they're freaking out because they can't have their birthday party, recognize, well, this is a real big change for them.
Mm.
But one thing I have noticed about kids is that kids are way more resilient in a lot of ways than we think they are. Like I think that all the people, so many people were putting up a big fuss about wearing masks and kids having to wear masks to school, and the kids go to school and they're like, "Oh, this is just school." Like I'm wearing a mask, I'm washing my hands all the time. And they're okay.
Mhm.
But yes, there are definitely the kids that aren't okay, and it's good to acknowledge that. And maybe it might be at a point where we need to get help. It's okay to get help for our kids too, like
Mhm.
psychological help. That's okay to send our kids to the counselor.
Mhm.
um, and maybe just love on them a little bit more. Spend more time reading with them. Don't fill them up with activities. I've always been a huge fan of just letting my kids be kids. Like all we ever did was piano lessons. We've never been a sporty family, partly on purpose because I didn't want my kids to come home from school and then have to go out and do a bunch of stuff every evening.
Mhm.
I just wanted them to play because playing really helps a lot with their ability to cope and their resilience, just having that time to just be kids. And so I saw some conflicting reports a few months into COVID, when the kids were at home all the time. And I saw a lot of people saying, this is so bad for them. They need to be in school. But then I also saw a lot of people saying, my kids are doing so much better. My kids are having less anxiety. There's less depression because they are just relaxing. They're doing some work and then they're playing with Lego or they're playing outside. I saw so many kids riding bikes and learning. Rollerblades came back in style this summer. I'm like, what?
That's awesome.
And so the kids were just playing. So I think for kids that are like super stressed out, I think we need to cut them some slack, acknowledge that this is grief, this is stress, and then help them find ways to release that stress. Maybe it means doing less. It usually means doing less and allowing them free time to read or to play outside, to go on family walks. Slowing down in our society is always a good thing.
Right. Yeah. Isn't that the truth? And I think that like what you said about them being resilient is completely true. Like I know when we've had like our kids are back in school, but of course they're gonna get colds and things, which means I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, everybody, just so you know, when you get a cold, it's like a 10-day deal, whether it's a 2-day deal or not.
Yeah.
And so of course it happened to our youngest, who is our extrovert. So I'm like, oh, I just felt so sad for him. But he handled it well. But it was my anxiety about his reaction was like louder than his actual response. So that was interesting too, to be like, okay, Andrea, just is God big enough to be God for your kid, or what's that about? And to let them need him, right? And to acknowledge that, okay, he has an opportunity here to reach out to God for help, or
Yeah.
to have his mom try to fix it with ice cream and whatever all. And it's like, yeah, no, 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 let's feel the things we need to feel and then do what we
Yeah.
need to do with them. But it's
That's
hard
a
to give
really
them that
good
space
point.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, that we need to allow our kids to fail sometimes and to feel those things and then to take them to God and say, okay, we can ask God for help with this, right? With this feeling or with this stress. If our kids never need God, how do they really experience him in their lives?
Right. Yeah.
We always rush in and try to fix things, but maybe we just need to teach them to take it to God.
Yeah, it's the dance, right? The good old, like you
Mhm.
like your abide there, the good old abide in him, and as he leads
Yeah.
us in the ins and outs of all the parenting things. But I
Mhm.
am very grateful for people like you who write books and give us resources that we can use in our parenting and beyond. So thank
Mm.
you for what you're doing, and thank you so much for your time today, Christy.
No problem. This has been fun.
Yay.